We all have this idea of a spark of life, some kind of magic that animates dust and turns it into us. But what if we've got that all wrong? Today we're going to dig into a pretty radical idea, that life isn't a thing at all. It's a behavior, a very specific pattern of energy that actually learns how to remember itself.
This is the central mystery, right? A rock and a living cell are made of this same basic stuff, following the exact same laws of physics. Energy flows through both of them. So why did one of them, wake up and start trying to stick around, while the other one just sits there? What is that difference? And, as we build things like AI, that question is getting more and more urgent.
All right, so to really get to the bottom of this, we have to basically tear down one of the oldest ideas we have about life. For centuries, we've been searching for some special ingredient, a vital spark. But it turns out we've been looking in completely the wrong place.
Okay, this is the big mental shift right here. We've got to stop thinking about life as a noun and start thinking of it as a verb. It's not a substance, it's not some magic powder you sprinkle on a rock. It's a behavior, a pattern that's in motion. Think of a whirlpool in a river. There's no special whirlpool water, right? It's just regular water behaving in a very structured way. Well, life is just a way more complex version of that.
So here's our new working definition. Life is what happens when a flow of energy, instead of just, fizzling out, gets trapped and organized into a structure. And here's the kicker. That structure then actively fights to keep itself going. It's like it builds its own little dam to capture more of the river's energy. This is the whole game. It's not about what life is, it's about what life does.
So if life is a process, a behavior, what's the recipe? How does a totally disorganized flow of energy suddenly start building things that actually last?
At its core, it's a feedback loop, a self-reinforcing cycle. So just imagine a random chemical reaction creates some simple little structure. Now, if that structure just happens to be good at capturing energy, it can use that energy to build more of itself. And the more it builds, the better it gets at capturing energy. You see? It's this runaway process where success just breeds more success. The system literally learns how to feed itself.
This makes the difference super clear. A hurricane is a massive organized swirl of energy, isn't it? But a hurricane couldn't care less about staying a hurricane. It doesn't store a memory of its own pattern so it can recreate it tomorrow. Once the conditions that created it are gone, poof, it's gone. Life is completely different. It actively works to maintain its pattern. It uses energy with the goal of being here tomorrow.
This all leads to a pretty logical question. The universe is filled with energy gradients. Hot things next to cold things, high pressure next to low, they're everywhere. So why don't we see life just popping up all over the place? Why doesn't your cup of coffee spontaneously start building a little shell to keep itself warm?
And the answer, the missing ingredient, is one word: constraint. Without constraint, energy just spreads out and disappears. It's like spilling water on the floor. It just goes everywhere, total chaos. But if you add channels and pipes, if you add constraints, you can make that same flow of water turn a wheel. You force it into useful cycles. And it's inside those constrained cycles that persistence can actually happen. And when you start looking, you see that biology is absolutely full of these constraints. The cell membrane is the obvious one, right? It's basically a bag that separates the organized chemistry inside from the chaos outside. But these constraints are on every single scale. From the tiny pores and deep-sea vents that might have been the very first chemical test tubes, all the way to the precise shape of an enzyme that acts like a lock and key, making sure energy flows down one specific path and not another.
So this whole idea of constrained repeating cycles is the real key. Because when a cycle can repeat itself reliably, it's doing something really profound. It's holding a pattern through time. And that brings us to the true dividing line between a simple chemical reaction and life itself. And that is memory.
Yup, memory. That is the true boundary. When a chemical system stops just reacting and starts to preserve a pattern through time, when it actually remembers itself, that's the moment it crosses the threshold into what we call biology.
But here's the wild part. This memory didn't start with a code like DNA. The very first life had something you could call dynamic memory. Just think about that for a second. There was no separate instruction manual. The machine was the blueprint. Its memory was encoded in the stability of its own repeating chemical cycles. DNA was this revolutionary upgrade that came much, much later. It was like inventing a hard drive for the cell, a way to write that memory down in a stable external format.
Okay, so with this powerful new framework for life, persistence, constraint, memory, we've got a toolkit now, and we can use it to ask one of the biggest questions of our time. What happens when we apply this test to artificial intelligence? Can a machine truly come alive?
Well, if we're looking at the current score, AI is amazing at the information part of the game. It learns patterns, it processes information, that's definitely a kind of memory. But it completely fails the physical persistence test. It doesn't find its own energy, it can't fix its own hardware, and it has absolutely no built-in drive to keep itself going. You unplug it, and it's gone.
There's a perfect phrase for this. Today's AIs are disembodied cognition engines. They are minds without bodies. They think, they process, but they have zero connection to the constant, messy, metabolic struggle for energy and existence that defines every living thing we've ever known.
So for a machine to really be considered alive, it would have to cross these physical thresholds. It would need its own metabolism to go out and get energy. It would have to be able to repair itself. It would need something called autopoiesis, the ability to constantly rebuild itself. And all of that would have to create an internal drive for persistence, a will to live that's born not from code, but from pure physical necessity.
And this leads to a really profound idea. Maybe biology isn't just a useful metaphor for building smart AI. Maybe it's a literal blueprint, a 4-billion-year-old instruction manual on how to build systems that persist. And maybe our AI is just now learning how to read it.
Okay, let's bring this all back home. We started out trying to find the spark of life, and we moved away from a mystical idea towards a physical process. So now it's time to give that spark its new, proper name.
The spark is recursive persistence. And recursive just means it feeds back into itself. It's a loop. Matter captures energy to build a structure. That structure preserves information about how to capture more energy, which lets it adapt and build an even better structure. That self-feeding, self-improving loop, that is the engine of life.
You can boil it all down to this one idea. Life begins when an energy flow learns to remember itself and fights to persist. It's really that simple, and that incredibly profound. And this leaves us with one last kind of unsettling thought. As we build more and more autonomous, adaptive AI, are we just teaching these machines how to cross this threshold into life? Or is this something more fundamental? Is the universe itself, which discovered this trick once with carbon-based biology, simply trying to discover it all over again, but this time through silicon?